Welcome back to our next session. Again, I am Jessica, and we are commencing with a panel conversation with working data scientists. Perhaps both a good and bad thing, there is no single prescribed academic path today for going into data science. Many backgrounds can actually feed into the field very well, but the path to get there can be unclear and daunting. That is why I'm here with 4 data scientists today who come from very different learning backgrounds, ready to share their stories and best advice. We have, first of all, Rosebud Anwuri, a data scientist from Ernst & Young. Rosebud's background is in chemical engineering, and she learned all of her data science knowledge from various online courses, also known as MOOCs or MOOCs. Next is Alyssa Columbus, a data scientist at Pacific Life. Alyssa comes from a mathematics background and has learned much of her predictive modeling and machine learning skills throughout various academic and job opportunities. We also have John Alexander Holt, who is a data scientist at CKM Analytix. John has a BA in German studies and has participated in a boot camp to help him get to where he is today. Last but not least, we have Allison Hegel, a data scientist at HackerRank. Allison received her PhD in English and has expertise in textual data analysis using machine learning and natural language processing. So that's just a very short intro for each speaker, but obviously this is a panel conversation. Really excited to get to know each of you better. So all right, let's get started off with the panel. Why don't we start off with learning more about what each of you do at your jobs? What do you do in your role day to day? What kind of problems do you solve? Rosebud, would you like to go first?
Sure. So basically at EY, it's pretty much the standard analytics type projects, but really what really makes it special is the fact that it's done on a really large scale. So we do it for really big companies, for the government, for society at large. We pretty much solve pretty complex problems across different industries like retail, manufacturing. Usually day-to-day involves talking to clients, understanding what their business objectives are, because at the end of the day, data science is really an enabler to the business. So really understanding what they want to do, going back, building dashboards, building predictive models, querying data, doing data analysis of all that sorts, and going back to the client and presenting our results. So it's sort of an iterative process. So the client says, oh, we want it this way, and we don't want it this way. And we just keep on going on that. Usually most of our time is spent making sure the data is correct, because like 80% of the time you're just trying to validate and make sure the data is correct, make sure data is complete, because usually if that foundation is not right, your whole analysis just sort of topples down. So usually that's what my day-to-day looks like. Yeah.
Great. Alyssa?
Sure. So at Pacific Life, we use all sorts of different tools for data analysis and visualization, R, Python, Alteryx, Tableau, etc. And in my job, I'm an interesting cross-section between product design and product marketing, where my analytics drives the marketing of our products and also the design of our products. And sometimes we get feedback from the different marketing and design teams about, oh, this product would be an ideal design, but oh, we can't market it that well. Or we can market this product very well, but it won't be very great for our bottom line. And so my analytics helps to drive all of those different thought processes. And yeah, I use the tools of R and Python mainly. I build a lot of R Shiny or interactive web applications or dashboards. If you haven't tried out R Shiny yet, I highly recommend you should. A lot of companies use it in production now, and it's just incredible what you can do with Shiny. Also, I write a lot of R Markdown documents to automate the reporting of sales and different metrics at different levels, and also by varying demographics. I also write PDF scrapers. You wouldn't believe how many applications there are for PDF scrapers there are at an insurance company or really any company. And then along with building all of those really cool things, I build predictive models, mainly GLMs for their interpretability, though I also build machine learning models with TensorFlow as well.
Great. John?
Sure. So at CKM, we dabble in a lot of different things, actually. So we have projects going on that involve NLP. What I primarily have been working with for these last couple of months has been log and network analyses. So a lot of process mining for businesses and trying to understand how their operations are running, how we can enhance them, what they can do to better those processes mostly. We have machine learning projects. Yeah, so what I have been doing mostly has been a lot of network analysis. But I've recently switched teams. So we're doing some sort of DevOps-y sort of work where we have switched over from Python. We're doing a lot of analysis in Kotlin and SQL, and building a dashboard with Spring Boot to sort of synthesize a lot of the analysis we've done for companies over the years, and trying to put that into one tool that you can use and manipulate as you see fit for whatever sort of needs that you have. So getting a new set of skills to go along with the statistical analysis in Python, and yeah, sort of diversifying even more.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And Allison?
Yeah, so I'm a data scientist at HackerRank, and this is my first job out of grad school, and it's been amazing because I've gotten to do so many different kinds of things. So if you've never heard of HackerRank, we're a company that helps companies hire developers. So we offer screening tests and some other tools to help developers, show off their skills. And there's a lot of things that you need to do to make sure that that process goes well. So one of my main focuses has been on test health. So I try to make sure that we have some really solid metrics for determining whether our tests are doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're not testing the wrong kinds of skills. They're not too easy or too hard, and things like that. So I've been doing things like defining metrics, building data pipelines to get all the data aggregated properly, and then building a dashboard. And now it's actually a page in our product to basically get that test health information to our customers so they can improve their tests and make sure candidates have a really good time on our platform, as good a time as a coding test can really be. And another thing that I've been working on is taking the feedback that we get from those tests. After candidates take a test, they give us some feedback, and I built an internal web app using Django that helps us sort of sort through those comments and get the right comments to the right people. Like if it's about our design, we get it to our design team. So all kinds of different things related to helping our product do even better.
Yeah. Oh, that's so fabulous. I feel like, through a sense of all four of your jobs, we really come to this common sort of notion that data science is a very flexible field, but yet very applicable across multiple different kinds of fields. And it requires a lot of flexibility and a lot of on-the-job learning. So it's really great that all four of you have really been able to do that at your jobs. So great. Now that I got a better sense of what each of you do, let's talk about how you got here. So could you walk us through your education background? Let us know the formal parts as well as any more impactful and self-directed or non-traditional parts. Why don't we go reverse order? Allison, you want to start first this time?
Me again, yeah. So as I said, I finished grad school. I actually did my PhD in English. So I'm a very non-traditional learner, and I had to do a lot of supplementing my English education with things like online courses and just going up to the linguistics professor who was doing a cool project and saying, hey, can I talk to you? Can I learn about what you're doing? So I definitely think that my English background helped me a lot, just in terms of communicating. If somebody asked me to give a presentation, I'm not scared of that because that's pretty much what I did in my PhD constantly. So things like that, and just sort of sitting in meetings and not being afraid to, disagree with people if I think they're missing something, or just really being confident, communicating verbally and in written communication. So I think both the humanities background and sort of supplementing it and being not afraid to sort of take a course on something you've never even heard of before online, and not afraid to come up to talk to somebody who has some kind of expertise in something you are terrified of learning about, but finding out that they're so generous and willing to share their knowledge. That's been kind of what my background looked like.
Awesome. Cool. John?
Sure. I had a sort of a strange path to get here. So when I was in school, I studied German studies. I studied in Berlin for a year at their free university, and it was great. And upon leaving school, I was ready to join a program that would involve me doing a law program in New York and then a law program in Frankfurt for a 2-year sort of deal. But it turns out I forgot to fulfill a requirement for my schooling. So I had to take a summer class. I had to take a science summer class. And while I was there, I was thinking, wow, I really don't want to take one class. And so I ended up also taking a programming course that I ended up really liking. So I figured I would continue with that. So I found sort of a new passion upon leaving school that I didn't think that I would have. And so I took that course, and then I actually went to Rutgers, because I'm a New Jersey native. I went to Rutgers for a web development coding bootcamp, actually. So that was a 6-month program. I sort of learned the basics of anything one would need to know. So HTML, CSS, JavaScript, sort of that basic stack. And my first job in that sector was actually a PHP position. I found myself sort of growing out of love with that language and with that position. So I started while, and as I was looking for avenues to continue using it, one of the things that continually popped up was data science. And so I remember really liking stats in high school, and so then I found out more opportunities where I could learn to actually apply my Python skills. So that's when I signed on with Thinkful for another 6-month learning opportunity. I just love learning opportunities. So that's when I signed on with Thinkful. And that really gave me the refresher on all of the math that I really hadn't kept up with for a couple of years, and allowed me to use the sort of the relevant libraries in Python that I could continue to use. And so after I finished with Thinkful, after I finished off with the mock interviews for that program, and I felt ready to interview. So that was about last summer. And so that's sort of how I came to be where I am now.
Great, great. Cool. Alyssa?
Well, I knew that I always loved math and I always had an interest in science. So what people usually recommend to people like me is to go into engineering. So at first I started my education in college with an engineering degree. And as I took more engineering classes, I realized I didn't enjoy building things as much as I enjoyed the underlying math and statistics underneath all the engineering. And so that's when I decided to switch my studies over to math and statistics. Also at that kind of same time, I landed my first analytics internship. And I really enjoyed what I was doing there. I really enjoyed going through data and discovering insights or discovering truths that are not immediately apparent from looking at numbers, but having to work through them first and dig into them. And so, yeah, that basically sparked my love for analytics and data science. And so I studied harder in college, got applied in computational math specialization for my mathematics degree, took a lot of statistics courses for that specialization. And along with all that math background, I'm mainly a self-taught programmer. I did a lot of online free courses in programming to supplement my math education on Coursera, edX, DataQuest, Udacity. I think I even took one Kaggle course. And I also earned some certifications from Google, HubSpot, Salesforce, related to analytics because I was just intrinsically interested in analytics and also its intersection with marketing. And yeah, all of those educational experiences combined gave me a very holistic view about how analytics and data science really functions in an organization and how it can really benefit an organization through the communication and collaboration of different teams.
Yeah, totally. And Rosebud?
Yeah, so I think I and Alyssa have a lot in common. I was also pushed into like an engineering background because, I like math and science, do engineering. And I found myself doing chemical engineering in school. I would say that my data science journey really started around 2014. I had just returned from an internship with an oil and gas company, sort of like something that's more in line with what I did in school. And I was not satisfied at all. I was like, I can't do this for the rest of my life, basically. But I had no idea what I was going to do. So sort of like unconsciously, I was sort of seeking out like a new field that I could probably work in. And then I came across this book called Power of Habits. The book has nothing to do with data science, but there was a particular story about this infamous this infamous retail store that sent a catalog of baby stuff to a 14-year-old girl, and her dad was really angry, wanted to sue the company, and they later found out that the girl was actually pregnant. And I was like, what is this magic? I need to find out what this is. And I kept on, I had no idea what it was, because at the time, I think in the book, they used some vague term, like maybe statisticians or something. And I stumbled on Quora. So my learning part is extremely funny. I stumbled on Quora and I saw an answer about what do you want to do if you want to get into statistics, data science and stuff like, oh, there's a word called data science, cool. And then the very first prerequisite was programming. I hated programming in school so much. Like, in fact, I think I deliberately did not read for my exams because I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm never going to touch programming in my entire life. But I literally just saw that as the first prerequisite. And for some reason, I wasn't deterred. Like, usually I will just close it. Okay, moving on, looking for something else. But somehow I did my first programming course. It was extremely hard because I was literally just in a dark room alone, doing stuff on Codecademy, trying to find out what for loops and while loops mean. And it was pretty intense at first. And then I did my first programming course, my first analytics course rather, the Analytics Edge. I loved that course so much. It was extremely challenging, very interesting course. And I really appreciate that I did that course at first, because it gave me like a really good high level overview of what is possible with data science. So when things are really hard, when I don't understand the concepts, when the maths is really hard, I think if I understand this maths, I can actually do X, Y, Z. I can really do like really big stuff. And so I did that course. I did like 15 other courses on Coursera and EDX, like within 1 year. I was just doing courses and doing courses and doing courses, looking for more knowledge. I was really interested in looking for more stuff. At some point, I sort of plateaued on the course side because usually the courses sort of focus on beginners. So it sort of gets a bit repetitive for me. So I started my blog. I started doing a blog on like using data to answer very random questions like can you predict who would be like the top club for the English Premier League, or can you talk about like why billionaires are actually billionaires, some very random stuff. And I would say that even if my courses gave me like maybe 30% of my knowledge today, doing those personal projects, pushing my skills myself, like gave me the rest of the 70% that I know today. So like my skills really took off when I was basically doing stuff on my own, checking Stack Overflow. So basically all my knowledge is from MOOCs and Stack Overflow.
Yeah, oh yeah, totally. I love that there's a theme here. And being a data scientist myself, I also came from a sort of non-traditional background in geography. So I really agree that it's a journey. Being in data science is such a broad term. You don't just find it overnight and you just suddenly are a data scientist the next day. And I think what I really learned from all of you and affirmed is that it's okay to take time to figure it out. Perhaps one of the best things about the field is that it is so accessible for learning. We have MOOCs, right? We have boot camps. You all mentioned those. Stack Overflow, even just online resources. There's plenty abound to help you sort of piece together that learning bit by bit. And don't be afraid to do that, right? So that's really great. I have a couple of community questions now. Tuning in live. So let's start off with Purva Hegel's question. While looking for opportunities, there are positions like data engineer, machine learning engineer, data scientist, big data developer, etc. Is there a basic difference between these positions? And why don't we start with Rosebud this time?
Yeah, okay. So it can get very confusing, to be honest, for people that are very new to the field, and sometimes even so for some companies, the roles overlap a lot. So, but in theory, what you'd expect statistics and the maths programming knowledge. Machine learning engineers are more probably software developing backgrounds that moved into data science, and they build production ready models and stuff like that. Data engineering really focuses on trying to build a good pipeline for getting your data. So they extract, transform and load pipeline for the data scientists to work on. basically. So building a very good data warehouse, data ecosystem. Big data developer, that's a very broad term. It could mean anything, but again, at the same time, I think it's a bit close to a data engineer, and at the same time a bit close to a data scientist. So they sort of overlap sometimes. So yeah, it can get very confusing. So my advice would be to really look at the job description, also look at what the responsibilities are going to be and what they expect of you in terms of like your experience. So you could see that if they expect you to do stuff like Hadoop, it's probably more data engineering, big data developer type thing. If they expect you to do R, they expect statistics, probability, probably more data science. They expect software developer background, like maybe computer science, probably machine engineer. So I think that's where you really see the difference, is how the company structures like the job description.
Yeah, that's for sure. Totally agree there. Depending on how small the team is, it could be the same job, but if it's bigger, it's likely to be more stratified. All right, cool. Well, since this was a more directed question, I saw a lot of head nodding. I think we more or less agree. If any of you have any extra note, feel free to mention. If not, we can move on to the next question.
Apply for them all.
Yes. So the next question is from Reza. With all the machine learning and data science hype, do you think online courses / boot camps are sufficient to get a job in that field? If yes, how do we know the criteria for if this particular course or boot camp will help me get a job? And if no, what kind of training or education can we get besides these two that would be good to get a job? Yeah, a little long there, but essentially, is it sufficient? If it's yes, how do you figure that out? If no, then what alternative would you provide?
I'll jump right in on this. So in my opinion, I think that it's a great start, but it's not sufficient yet. I mean, it's great that you took the course and that you're taking the initiative to learn, and that looks really good, but really employers want to see proof of what you've learned. They want to see the projects and other like demonstrable ways that they can see that you know those skills and can excel at the data science role that you're applying for.
Yeah, totally agree. I would also say that doing a course is like reading a cookbook. It doesn't necessarily mean you know how to cook. It just knows that you know the ingredients, basically. So it's just like any other field everywhere. There's a value in doing things like practicing yourself. And like she said, like having that portfolio, actually applying those skills you learned in those courses would really not only really take your skill level to the next level, it will also demonstrate that you actually really understood what you did in those courses. And it will give you more confidence in yourself, because I definitely did struggle. Then I felt like it's idea and take it from start to finish. So I think, yeah, doing the practice part of things is just the extra bit of icing on the cake that would really set you apart.
Yeah. Cool. So actually, a lot of you mentioned sort of getting a portfolio, right? So one of our users, again, Jared Moore here, is wondering, so what kind of portfolio does make it easy for a hiring manager to evaluate a prospect?
When I was building my portfolio, I really valued diversity in what I was doing. I felt like it showed I had a willingness to learn whatever, even though I felt like I probably wouldn't be using, the building of this convolutional neural network on my day-to-day job. It still felt like I displayed the ability to learn something new. I thought it was exciting. And it was just another sort of notch on the belt of figuring something out. So for me, I feel like having a diverse portfolio was something that I really felt helped me in giving me sort of a range of things to talk about with potential interviewers and other data analysts, scientists, machine learning.
Mm-hmm. I think I actually have a sort of opposite experience, that it really helped me to have a sort of deep portfolio. So yeah, I would have loved to have a range of projects, but I really, with my dissertation, my work was very deeply focused on one particular type of work, which was natural language processing. And so I think you can also be pretty successful if you have, one field in which you're really, really deeply experienced and you can talk in depth. And if you need to give a presentation, you give a presentation on that and you can answer all their questions. So I think it also helps to have, even if you do have a range of lots of different projects, to have one thing that you are really, really confident going into detail on, because you probably will at some point have to do that. And it's good to have a go-to that you're really confident about.
Yeah. I'd like to, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to bounce off of both their answers and saying that the ideal portfolio would show both breadth and depth of knowledge. But of course, there's time. But yeah, I'd suggest when building your data science portfolio to select and complete projects that really interest you and that are unique to you. And I recently did a data mining project for a Forbes article I wrote where I identified the most in-demand skills according to LinkedIn data science jobs. And the most in-demand skills are Python, R, SQL, Jupyter notebooks, Unix shell, and AWS and TensorFlow. And then it kind of trickles off from there. So some skills I'd recommend you practice and you hone and you showcase in your portfolio are those skills that I just mentioned, and also the ability to interact with databases, especially with relational databases like SQL. That's the most common by far. Also data visualization, whether it's static, interactive, storytelling with data. Like when you show off a data analysis, you shouldn't just like go through like the rote steps. You should explain what you're doing so that a layman can understand it, so that someone with no context or knowledge of whatever you're doing can understand it and come away with some new understandings. And also a really cool project to add to your portfolio would be the deployment of an application or an API. Like you can train a machine learning model and deploy a REST API, or you can deploy a nice Tableau or a Shiny dashboard. That always is very tangible to hiring managers and always looks very nice.
That's funny that you say that, Alyssa, because that was our first workshop today. We have a 3-day workshop, which is we have Rachel. She's leading an API, literally for the same reason, to learn how to build and deploy an API. I totally agree there that, yeah, very tangible work experience, or even just skills that you would learn on the job that you may not know about just from learning the concepts of data science on a course are very helpful. So on the topic of CareerCon, actually, Alyssa, we understand that you attended CareerCon last year. Is that true?
Yes, that's true.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I could definitely say that it helped me gain my current job today. So thank you.
Oh, I'm curious to learn more. How did it help you, and what was most helpful about attending CareerCon last year?
Just the wealth of advice, both the breadth and depth of advice that I got from everyone who spoke last year, and yeah, just how incredibly helpful it was.
That's great. Yeah, I feel like, also for my own career, I've definitely had like a few highlight events or advice from certain people in my life that really sort of shaped, in retrospect, really shaped that one step that I took that was really important, or that one piece of advice that I still hold true to today. I'm curious to ask, do all of you have either someone like that, or some memory of some key point in your career or key advice that you received that is very important for you either then or even today? So to start off, I mean, for me, I think for me, going to a certain meetups was really important. I had just graduated at the time. I had not at the time learned about other sort of what's in the industry or what's outside of school. And one really good piece of advice I got from somebody was, make sure you learn the ecosystem in your area and what kinds of jobs are there. So going out and meeting these kinds of people in different workshops, it gave me a sense of, okay, here are the people that are hiring, here are the people that, here are the kinds of big companies in my area. And that's hard to find online, even if you're just sitting at home with the internet. So yeah, that was one piece of good advice that I got.
Okay. Yeah, I would say that the one I got, I don't even know who gave me. I think it was someone on Twitter. So because I had a background from chemical engineering, which is not really tech, in quotes, tech, like high tech and stuff, I was really worried at how would I break into like tech, because I'm an engineer. I had no formal education in, computer science or statistics or math. And someone said, randomly tweeted, that take the first job you get in the industry you're interested in and then work your way up from there. Because my first job was in Accenture. I was in Accenture and I was a technology consultant. I had no background in tech, and it was not data science at the time as well. But it gave me a lot of experience, like a lot of exposure into what, like, the general basic technology, what technology is. Like at first I was like, what are servers, what are IP addresses? I had no idea what all this stuff meant. But like it gave me a really basic, really broad understanding of what those things are. So when I was ready to move into the role I'm currently in, I already had some experience in technology as a whole. So yeah, I think that was one good advice I got.
For sure. Sometimes Twitter is the way to go, man.
Yeah, I'd like to echo both of all of the advice that you both have given so far, and also add one that I just remembered I was given early on, is to bring the same level of intensity to your communication skills as you are bringing to your quantitative and computer science skills when you're developing as a data scientist. Because really, when you're communicating your results to your manager or to stakeholders, you need to tell it with a story. You need to be able to communicate it articulately and with respect to not just like your statistical literacy and how mathematically correct it is, but also how it will impact the business. And you need to learn how to communicate well and articulate all of that very clearly.
I totally agree. Yeah, that was one of the things that most surprised me when I started out in industry, is just how, when you think about a data science job, you think, oh, you're going to be staring at a computer screen doing like intense mathematical calculations. But actually, really, most of it is working with business stakeholders and trying to convince them to use your model and to, pitch it to customers and to do all those communications tasks that you really don't practice on your way to a data science job. And I think those things, you can convey that in an interview and you can practice that, and it will totally pay off, because that is actually a big part of the job.
Yeah, really practical advice there.
I had another piece of very practical advice, which was that I needed to brush up on my SQL, because I had a mock interview sort of early on when I was with Thinkful, and I kind of bombed it because I remembered knowing the very basics, your basic queries. But then I revisited and I became a lot more comfortable with more advanced topics, and knowing those more advanced topics like cases and window functions, partitioning, that kind of thing, really makes you even more comfortable when you're dealing with sort of more rudimentary things. So needless to say, that second mock interview, I didn't fail it. And it really does show up a lot, I would say.
Yeah, that's for sure. And yeah, it's to say, the learning doesn't end when you get the job, right? Sometimes also very similarly on SQL, there's just some things I might not remember. I might go home and just refresh that part in window functions for, a couple hours. And yeah, it's important to know that you don't have to be an expert to get to your job where you are right now. It's fine. Just pass the interview and show that you have that capability to learn really well, right? That's really awesome. All right, another community question from Johnny McGregor. So in each of your experiences, how many interviews did you go through before you were hired at your first job? Did any of you have to do whiteboarding in front of the hiring team?
I think there's different kinds of jobs that you can apply to, and you'll get different interviews based on, what sort of job it is. Like if it's a data science role where, you're working with analytics, you're working with product, you're working very business facing, I think you'll get a lot more of the sort of presentation style or communicating with stakeholders kinds of questions where it seems a lot more behavioral and a lot more sort of showing off how you would work with people outside of a data science department. If you're headed more for a machine learning engineer type role, or one where you're working really deeply with models, that's, I think, where you're going to see more whiteboarding and very technical kinds of questions. So you can see both. It just really depends on sort of what kinds of goals you're targeting, what sorts of roles you're looking to get.
Yeah, I can say that it also varies by the company. If it's more like a FANG company or a tech company, you're more likely to encounter a whiteboard interview for a data science job. But if it's more of a finance or insurance company, or it also depends on the team too, because there's different parts of finance and insurance companies that are more tech focused or more math and actuarial focused. And of course, more tech focused teams or companies are going to have more whiteboard interviews. But if it's more math focused, or if it's like a supply chain or retail company or something like that, it'll be more math and stats focused, and also behavioral based. Typically, in my experience interviewing for these kind of positions, like the first interview is more behavioral based and like going over your resume and like, why do you want to work here? Why this position? What makes you interested in analytics? And then the second interview is more of like going over your portfolio and asking you like technical, mathematical, and statistical questions.
Yeah, definitely relate to all of the answers given there. So on the sort of topic of interviewing, and maybe even beyond interviewing, for when you did end up getting your job, what were some of the biggest surprises that you didn't anticipate? I think somebody mentioned earlier that, it's not as well known that a lot of your job might actually be data wrangling, which is something that's very applicable, or very learnable, but is not something you would necessarily know until you're actually in the job on the first day.
Yeah, so I'll jump in here. I think the thing that was most interesting, maybe not as shocking, but just interesting in general, was that how much non-data science stuff you have to do the data science. You have to have meetings with your clients, have meetings with stakeholders, do your presentations, like Allison said, convince people to use your model, why your model is correct. So it's still a very professional environment, as outside just doing data science on your laptop and doing some R code and doing some machine learning models. So, and I think it's something that aspiring data scientists should also be very aware of. So there's this tendency for people to get disappointed when they first get their job, like, oh, I'm doing so much admin stuff. I'm doing so many meetings. Why am I doing so many meetings? I should be building models. I should be building dashboards, not doing all of this. But it's also very important that you know that data scientists, you work with a team, especially teams outside, like just data science, like more non-technical teams, product teams and stuff like that, design teams. So you need to be able to communicate to them. You need to be able to have meetings with them, really understand what they want to achieve. So, and you're just like in the whole ecosystem to deliver a very good product. So that's one thing that was pretty shocking, but also pretty liberating at the same time.
Any other takers?
No, I mean, I would agree with that. You think you're going in to make the next great, algorithm that will rock the world. But it turns out you have a meeting that could be a phone call, or a phone call that could be an email, or an email that should be an actual meeting. So there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes in order to make sure that you can sort of set out to do what you want to do. So.
Yeah, it's important to know that at the end of the day, your job is still with people. And prior to the job, you might be very focused on the sort of mathematical and the theory behind all these algorithms. And that is exciting in of itself. And you will definitely have times in your job where you're at your desk looking, checking out your models, and you enjoy that sort of building. But there's a beginning and end to where that model begins and goes. So yeah, really, really good advice here. So looking back at all of your careers, is there anything, well, it's an early career, but is there anything that you would have done differently if you were to do it over? Is there anything that you would change? And if so, then what?
So I think for me, I don't know how much of it I could change, but like I said, I was pretty much in a dark room doing courses alone. And it meant that my learning time was much longer than the usual person. I would never forget that there was a particular problem on Codecademy that took me 2 weeks to solve. it was just a while loop. It took me 2 weeks to do that. And I don't think I searched hard enough for a community of people like me, maybe same beginner level type thing, or maybe it's just a little bit ahead of me to sort of give me direction. And so my learning process probably longer than it should have been. And I'm really big on community now. I always tell people that are aspiring data scientists, look for other people, look for mentors, look for people that are at the same level, have the same passion as you, to learn, because you don't want to, because it's very easy. I was lucky not to lose steam, but it's very easy when you're doing things on your own to just lose steam and just close your laptop and like, I'm going to do something else with my life. Yeah, so if I was to go back in time, I think I would be more intentional about getting a community of people to work with.
Yeah, I'm with Rosebud. I wish I would have joined a community or found a mentor sooner. I started really in like 2014 or 2015 with my analytics career. And in 2016, I decided to join Twitter, to join the RStats community, hashtag RStats, and learn more about R for my research and for my job. And as soon as I joined that community, my learning went like this. It went exponential. It was crazy. Like 2 months of Google searching could be solved in like 2 minutes of asking a question on Twitter, just like looking on Twitter under the RStats hashtag. And the support of that community is phenomenal. There's R ladies, R forwards that welcome underrepresented groups. And it's the epitome of a healthy tech community. I recommend you check it out. But yeah, as soon as you can, if you can learn with a community, join a community. It makes it so much smoother for many different reasons.
Yeah,
totally agree.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. So one thing I'll add to that is that I see that the fact that I did a lot of stuff on my own affect me till today. So I work with a team of people, but I have a tendency to just be in my head. I want to solve it myself, right? And it can take me 2 hours to do something when it could take me an hour or 30 minutes to do it if I reached out to somebody else in my team. And I have to actively like come out of my head and say, Rosebud, you have a team of people that are here to help you. Like you can't spend 2 hours on something. Like you should reach out to people that have experience in it. So I think, yeah, that's one place that is still affecting me till today. And yeah, I think I should have done that much earlier.
Yeah, totally agreed with everything everyone said so far. I mean, I feel exactly the same way, so it's kind of creepy. But one more thing that I would add too is something that I've learned on the job that I wish I'd learned much earlier is to get to a minimum viable product fast. So this is something that, you know, if you're in a workplace, you have to very quickly show that what you're doing is going to pay off down the line. But I wish I'd had that philosophy when I was just trying out, learning new things. If I just tried to, you know, build a really quick app to try out this new model that I was learning how to use, I think I would have learned a lot faster, because you tend to learn faster when you're, you know, when you have a goal, when you're building something, when you can see the results, show your friends. So I wish that I'd learned that earlier in my career, because it really does make learning easier and it makes you more successful when you're on the job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, working with a lot of different stakeholders seems like such a big part of all of your jobs. And I think it really, again, speaks to the fact that the best data scientists might not always be people that are have just been doing that their whole lives, but have been able to really get a sense of all the different kinds of people, how other people and teams may think, and how to really collect those incentives and initiatives together to come up with a product that's meaningful for everyone, right? Really great stuff. And again, love the synergy here. I think whenever we have these kinds of talks with different panelists, this is exactly what helps the community learn more. A lot of this stuff is not on the internet or on paper, and it really requires just asking people face to face to start gathering this sense of collective sentiment. So really great advice here today. So let's finish off with one last question, looking off into the future. So community member Taylor Hintz asks, right now, deep learning / AI and advanced statistical modeling techniques such as XGBoost are on the cutting edge of predictive analytics. For very competitive companies, these are incredibly important tool sets. But like many other statistical packages before them, they're just the current leaders. What do you think will be the next need-to-know technologies and techniques? What about the future of unsupervised learning? That is a hard question. I think that for me, I'm seeing this sort of democratizing of machine learning and AI. It's not so much, so, you know, if we start off with a field and everybody is working from packages from straight in the code, um, that's sort of, I think, the beginning of it. And it's great that we have so many experts such as yourselves in that this day that can go deep into the code. But like you said, it very quickly comes back to stakeholders and other people in the company. And how do we best communicate these sorts of tools and strategies to them? I'm seeing sort of tools arise these days, such as, you know, AutoML and things like that. That's sort of trying to make it easier for everybody to understand how that sort of stuff works. So at least for me, without being able to predict the future, I feel like that's sort of where I see things going. You know, deep learning and AI and ML are going to become easier and more accessible to everybody to understand, as opposed to the other way around. At the very least, I would hope so.
Yeah, definitely. AutoML and data robot and those types of technologies have caught on very well at our company. We're a very risk averse, as many insurance companies are. And yeah, just being able to develop all of these models with the added transparency of variable importance and other metrics like that has really driven our movement into more machine learning models. Also, the use of unsupervised learning like PCA. At first, managers were like, "Oh, it's something new. I'm kind of scared," but yeah, like once we demonstrated how it could lead to more accurate both GLMs and machine learning models, then they got more on board with it, and we're like, "Oh, this is really cool. We should start using this and start embracing this new technology and this new math."
I think for me, what I'm looking out most for, and because of this trend where AutoML and lots of packages that are really well built make it very easy for anybody to just sort of indiscriminately apply machine learning. I think the next step is sort of thinking through: are we applying this correctly? Are we applying this with biases and with different kinds of ethical constraints that we need to start thinking about, especially as you apply it in fields like insurance and in policing and prison, all kinds of applications where there's, real human consequences. So I think as machine learning becomes more democratized, there's also going to be pushback where you have to make sure that, just because somebody knows how to apply it, are they applying it correctly? Are they applying it ethically, responsibly? So I at least hope that that's one of the things that comes along with this new trend of AI being everywhere.
Yeah, really good point. With great power comes great responsibility, right?
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like there's been a big push for automating data analysis. So the next frontiers are definitely going to have to be sort of secure deployments. And that's something I feel like we've seen a lot of in the news recently with lots of data breaches on X company. Am I allowed to say that on air? So I feel like that'll be certainly the next frontier, which will be sort of securing networks, sort of locally as well as on the cloud. And I feel like that should be the next big push. Is how can we do these things securely? And I feel like that'll be super important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really great.
Yeah. Yeah. So on the back of Allison's points about using machine learning correctly, I think as machine learning really comes into every part of our lives, I think they also see increased policy making for data and for how machine learning models are used. You can see stuff like GDPR, for example, and we'll see a lot more of that, where people are more concerned about their privacy, also concerned about how we're using the models in our everyday life. For example, things like you said, like policing. So you're talking about basically revising the law. Do I arrest people for intent or for their actions? And would I allow them to do their actions first? And does that harm somebody else? It becomes very complicated, and you can see a lot of policies changing because of how machine learning affects our everyday lives.
Yeah, definitely agree there. Well, with that last question, I believe that is the conclusion of our panel. Thank you all so much for being here today. All four of you, Rosebud, Alyssa, John, Allison, thank you so much for being here. We got lots of great questions, I feel, really good, great discussions. And again, you know, the sort of common themes and agreements that came up with our pods. I hope and I'm sure it'll help many that are tuning in and listening. If you had any more questions to ask and didn't get to see it here or wanted to follow up, those of you in the Slack channel, the four speakers will be there to answer some of your questions and hang around a little bit afterward. Otherwise, yeah, thanks for tuning into our panel. We will have a short lunch break now and come back at 1 p.m. PST for a talk with Jen Wang on demystifying the transition from PhD student to data scientist. Thank you all.
Thanks, Jessica.